so you know my name. This is 19-year-old me. This is 100-year-old me. When I was in the 6th grade, I signed the school yearbook for my graduating class from elementary school, and it said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I put down, "I want to be an Army Air Corps fighter pilot." That's in 6th grade. At the same time, and there are those of you who remember this, we had two oil or gasoline companies in this area. One was Atlantic Richfield. So many of you may remember this. And Atlantic Richfield decided that they would build their business by attracting young kids and making them more interested in flying. And so I joined what was called the Jimmy Allen Flying Club. And this is the blueprint which taught me how to fly. In this blueprint, they showed me how to climb, showed me how to dive, turn right, turn left. And that was pretty great stuff, I thought. And then, in backing it up, we had a code of honor. And this code of honor started with 1, you will respect your father and mother. Okay, I'm with that. Number 2, you will always do what your teacher tells you to do. Okay. And so that was my introduction to flying. It wasn't until World War II that I had my first trip in the air. And this began at the age of 18, because I had to be 18 in order to enlist in the Army Air Corps. I was an asthmatic child. That was a no-no for the Air Force. So I had to find some way to disguise this so that when I had my physical, they could not hear me wheeze. I went to my doctor and I explained it, and he says, "I can fix that." And he gave me a couple of pills. He says, "Before you go in for your physical, take the pills." I took the pills, and I want to tell you, I was flying. But they couldn't detect any asthma. So they accepted me in the service. Now, this is something that is of interest to you folks, I think. I enlisted, and where do you think they sent me for my first Army training? Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Fairfield.
Now, I'm a kid from the Philadelphia area, but that was pretty good. But so they sent me to Atlantic City, and my barracks was the Traymore Hotel, if you remember the Traymore, which was the largest hotel in Atlantic City at the time. And they put about 20 of us in each room. But we got to know what being in the Army was. How to march, how to turn right, how to turn left. We did all our calisthenics and our physical training on the beach, and otherwise we were marching on the boardwalk. We were there for only about 45 days, and the Air Force, or Air Corps as it was called in those days, the Air Corps really preferred to have people of college education come into its ranks. Since there were not enough who had volunteered, who were college educated, the Army then started a program. And I was part of this program, and where we aviation cadets, as we were called, were now sent to college as a group. So my group of cadets went to a little college in western Pennsylvania called Geneva College, which was a small, co-ed, conservative Christian college. And they bring us 18-year-old boys and put us on the third floor of the girls' dorm. I was flying again. Now, being 18-year-old boys and American boys, we soon figured out they had blocked off the stairways. They built a special fire escape for us. And but being 18-year-old boys, we soon figured out that if you knitted the sheets together and knotted, you then go over the side, out the window and down one floor, propelling down the floor, 18 floors. So it was a good experience. We learned. They taught us physics, they taught us mathematics, they taught us weather. It was a good basic program. And we stayed in the program for just about 2.5 months. And from there, they took us down to Nashville, Tennessee. Let me go back one and just tell you something else about it. While we were in Geneva College, which is north of Pittsburgh, they decided that they would have us cadets get our first taste of flying. And they took us to Allegheny County Airport, and they put us up in Piper Cub. And it was there that we got our first taste of actually being up in the air. And it's an airplane, and the instructor said to me, do you know anything about flying? I said, well, I'm a member of the Jimmy Allen Flying Club. He says, all right, wise guy. He says, turn me to the right. I took the stick, I got my feet, and I turned to the right. Bang. He says, fine, now turn me to the left. And I turned to the left, and he does that. He says, all right, now let me show you what flying is all about. And with that, he takes it, and we go into a loop. And do a loop again. And I start to feel it's starting to well up in here, and before long, I'm whoopsing all. That was the first and only time I was ever affected by being in the air. But when we got to the ground, they gave me a bucket and a mop. I had to clean it up. So I got down to Nashville. Now, Nashville was interesting because that was what was called a classification center. There, they put us through 1 week of rigid physical and psychological tests to determine whether we could handle being in the air. And also to determine whether we were fit to be trained as fighter pilots or trained as bomber pilots. Or not. There was a great deal of pressure on us to remain in the program. At any rate, so I remember one of the questions that was put to me psychologically was, okay, you've just shot down a German ME-109 pilot has bailed out. He's floating down in his parachute. What are you going to do? You going to just let him go, or are you going to kill him? I'm 18-year-old kid. What do I know about killing people? What is it they want from me? So I said, I'll kill the son of a bitch. That's been the right answer. And so I was selected for fighter pilot training, and then spent the next 6 months, 9 months training to be a pilot. First in those of you who recognize some of this as Spearman, the PT-17 for my primary training. This was in Americus, Georgia. Then we went to basic training, which was a little more sophisticated airplane, a BT-13. Okay, so that's the basic flight. You notice that I still has fixed landing. You're getting ahead of me here. You're flying ahead of me. This is basic flight training. Instructor in front, student would be in the back. And then we get through that, and the education we would get was all flying related. I will tell you this, at the time, we were told that if we did not learn how to solo in the first 8 hours of instruction, we were out. Now there are those of you in the room I know who have spent a great many hours learning how to fly, but that was the rule. If we didn't learn in 8 hours, out. So on August 4th, 1944, I graduated from flight training. Got my second lieutenant bars, I got my wings, and I was ready to fly. And so here we are, a bunch of 18-year-olds and hot bloods, and ready to go to fighter school. And so we went home for a 1-week vacation because we graduated. We came back, and we were told, boys, got a special operation for you. We're going to get a new secret weapon and put us on a train up to a little town in North Carolina, a little airport. We see these boxes on the field, and we think, oh man, this is going to be something. And dawn comes, we see what we thought were boxes were gliders. These are what are called CG-4A gliders, made by Waco. They were pulled, that's pretty big, looks pretty big, and a whole 10 to 12 paratroopers, and the whole front end swings up so they can get out. And the idea being that we can double our troop activity on an airborne operation by having our C-47s not only carry the paratroopers, but also drive them to the air. The CG-4A had a reputation at that time as a flying coffin. And the reason being that we had some terrible experiences, particularly in D-Day and later at the Market Garden operation. It's difficult to fly a glider. I got the glider wings. They taught me how to fly a glider. And I wrote to the president, I said, you can't do that. I'm trained as a fighter pilot. You know where that got me. But problem with being a glider is you're in the air, you're not at a high altitude, and if you're being shot at, you want to get down fast as you can. But you want to get down in one piece. The problem is that your tendency is to push the nose down. You want to get down to the ground fast. But the minute you do that, you build up flying speed. And when you build up flying speed, you're going to overshoot your mark. And so it's a difficult operation. I will just tell you one story. On D-Day, the 82nd Airborne dropped on the night of D-Day, dropped in France, in Normandy. I was not in on this operation. I had not arrived in Europe as yet. But a good friend of mine had dropped that night in the 82nd Airborne. And he tells me it was the middle of the night. He didn't know where he was. He hit the ground. The old paratroopers had been equipped with little crickets, as many of you may know, and he did a click-it, got no return sound, which meant nobody in his group was around. So he waited for the dawn, and he started crawling along the ground below these tall hedges, and he comes to the end of the hedgerow. And the time he looks around the corner, a German soldier looks around every way. Two 18-year-old kids looking at each other. I said, "What did you do?" He says, "We both got up and laughed." 18-year-old kids not ready to kill. We were there for a special operation, and they lined us up. But I'm talking about us, the group of 18-year-old kids in my group, and said, "All right, boys, we're going to give you." They give me 2 hand grenades and a little pistol. Now, the only time I'd ever seen a hand grenade was in the movie. Something about it. Do this. So we get the hand grenades, as they're still in the boxes. No instructions. So I said to my commanding officer, I said, "Sir, I don't know how to use these damn things." He says, "Well, you're going to be with the 82nd Airborne. I'll teach you." I said, "Well, so I just fight with the 82nd Airborne?" "Yeah, that's what you do. You try to get through the lines." And so I figured, well, this is where I die in this war. And that night I sent a letter home to my mother, tears streaming down how much I loved her, and waited. 4 a.m. Big sounds through the barracks. Mission canceled. Mission canceled. It so happened that our airfield was right next to a farm. And we looked out and we see a covey of quail coming across the field. So from every opening, every window, every door, you'd hear, whoa, 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 whoa. Boom! And just to show you how good we were, we didn't hit one feather or one bird. But, so I went into the commanding officer and said, "Sir, I'm trained as a fighter pilot, as you know, and I don't want to stay in this operation. And I said, I hate to tell you this, but I'd like to get transferred to a light bomber group." He says, "No openings." I I said, well, no openings for a light bomber. How about for a medium bomber? No openings. I said, well, I hate to really do this, but put me into the big B-17. He says, no opening. And then he said, but Shapiro, if you really want to fight, I'll put you in the infantry tomorrow. Whoa! That's no good. You don't want to hear that. And I said, no, sir. My God, the government spent so much money training me. At any rate, so I said, well, you're a pilot. Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to keep you guys here until we get a word that there are openings in the fighter squadrons. And so that's how I got to know the C-47. I had never flown a C-47 before. I hadn't flown a twin-engine plane. And so they stick me in the right seat of a C-47 so I could learn by doing. And by doing, I was in part of an operation that operated primarily out of England first. And then as the war progressed, as we got close to Germany, into Germany, we moved the whole squadron to France. And as a result, the operations that we were involved in were the 17th Airborne over the Rhine. We had other operations. We were primarily in the business of flying munitions and ammunition and gasoline to Patton and his tanks. So wherever they went, we would fly in. They would give us their prisoners if they had any. And they were very stingy with these prisoners. I would tell you one story. We landed in one field and they told us at the field, well, we have 13 prisoners. I said, I don't think we have room for 13 prisoners. Well, we can fix that. He calls over some master sergeant. Can you take these prisoners for a walk? Now, people understand this. War is not pretty. And none of those prisoners came back from that walk. And when I mentioned this to the master sergeant, I said, where the hell are these guys? He says, he calls the sergeant who had taken the prisoners for a walk. And he says, here, show him your arm. And forgive me, this makes me. He had a tattoo from one of the concentration camps. He was the guy who took the prisoners for a walk, and they did not return. But let me just recover from that. My war was that war. I was considered now a hybrid pilot. I was that pilot. The pilot means the only fighter I flew was a P-40 in training, and I was a C-47 pilot. And we did a wonderful job. I would tell you one experience. We arrived in one German airfield that we had bombed to smithereens. And the engineers had put down the plates so we could land on this field. And we landed. And I said, well, guys, I said, did you see what I saw? There's a Volkswagen in the parking lot. Yeah. I said, what do you say we capture the Volkswagen? Well, we had loading ramps on the C-47. Volkswagen, we loaded it into the airplane, and flew it back. Things like this, only an 18-year-old kid would do. The next one I tell you about is, well, let me just show you some. These are some of the, when we were in flight in formation, and I don't know if you've heard this term before, but we called the DC-47 the goose. Why? Its wings actually flat in the air. So, this is the cockpit of my C-47. You'll see it in the sorting. And this is how we lined up for takeoff when we had a multi-plane mission. And so, one other thing I'll tell you about 18-year-old kids. Coming back from one mission, we were feeling good. Just had a good landing, good show. I said to the guys, hey guys, you know, on the way back we passed right over the Eiffel Tower. I said, what do you say? I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll fly us right over the Eiffel Tower and tap the top of the tower with my wings. And what does the scoop say? Hey, yeah! We fly, on course, right over Paris. And there's the Eiffel Tower, and I think, uh-oh, that's not such a good idea. I come down, though, and you're going to see, this is just some, what we look like on missions.
Alan, you might add that you took all of these photographs.
Yes.
With the camera your mother gave.
This is Le Havre, France. And this is what Le Havre looked like after we finished bombing. This is the Rhine River here, and here we're on a mission over into Germany. But you can see, and here we are, flying right over Paris, and that's the Arctic Drive. And this is a special spot. This is the Eiffel Tower, and this is my wingtip. And here